Yesterday, 20th of November 2025, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was found guilty of terrorism charges and he was sentenced to life imprisonment alongside other sentences that would run concurrently. This is after about a 10-year trial. This is 2025. He was first arrested in 2015. So this is the culmination of about a 10-year trial that had several back and forth, that had him released at a point, and then he was rearrested, and then the case went up to the Supreme Court and back to the lower courts. And yesterday, the judge of the Federal High Court gave a verdict. Now, one thing we must note is that the Buhari administration, the one before this current administration, made a decision not only to arrest Nnamdi Kanu, they also made the determination to keep him by all means. Nnamdi Kanu is a British citizen with Nigerian heritage, and he was running Radio Biafra from London, from the UK. Now, the Radio Biafra was to support the cause of Biafra. Biafra is from the Republic of Biafra, the default Republic of Biafra. At the time, Nigeria had 3 and then 4 regions. We had the northern region, the western region, and the eastern region. And later, the midwestern region was created. So, and we had a situation whereby there was a coup in 1966, and then under military leadership, we have military heads of the various regions. So at that time, Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu was the military head of the eastern region. And then there were a number of things that took place, and the head of the eastern region, after getting approval from the Eastern Consultative Assembly, now declared independence from Nigeria and now changed the name of the eastern region to the Republic of Biafra. And so anytime you hear Biafra, it's in reference to that. And that led to the civil war that was fought from 1967 to 1970, and eventually the leadership of Biafra surrendered, and then Nigeria, the effort to leave Nigeria did not succeed. And so Radio Biafra, that was being run by Nnamdi Kanu in the UK, is promoting the cause of that default Republic of Biafra. And then they said that there were statements that were made by Nnamdi Kanu from the Radio Biafra programs, and that Nnamdi Kanu had addressed World Igbo Congress in the US, and he made reference to needing guns and bullets. So the number of statements that he made that were deemed to incite violence, and so he was arrested when he was in Lagos, when he went to Lagos. The Buhari administration came in May 29, 2015. In October, that was when October 2015 was when Nnamdi Kanu was arrested. He was arrested and was charged with serious offences, but there wasn't really, aside from the statements he made, wasn't really any substantive thing found on him. And you know, the evidence the Nigerian government had at the time wasn't that strong. And so a couple of times the court granted him bail, and the Buhari administration was adamant, and they kept him. You know, the DSS and security agencies kept him. They kept going to court, you know, and it went on and on. The Buhari administration made a decision to go hard line on those who were agitating for various causes. You know, and that decision to go hard line, I think, in my opinion, was sort of a mistake, because before Nnamdi Kanu was arrested in that October 2015, and when the information got out, before then, Nnamdi Kanu was not as popular as he was before he was arrested. It was after his arrest and the news of his arrest and the news of the organizer of Radio Biafra being arrested and being held in detention that made him more popular. There's this phenomenon that you will note, that there are people that before they were arrested and put in prison, they were not as popular. But later, after the arrest, they become more popular. It has happened so many times. You have Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Before Nelson Mandela was arrested, he wasn't as popular. But after he was arrested and he was in prison for many years, he now became a rallying point for those who were fighting apartheid in South Africa. And Nelson Mandela in prison, you know, served as a focal point, as a fulcrum upon which anti-apartheid movements, you know, and all that. And he became more popular after his arrest. The same thing with Aung San Suu Kyi in Myanmar when she was put under house arrest. The house arrest she was placed under, and she was under house arrest for many years, you know, gave impetus for calls for her to be released, you know, and then it now became a rallying point for the fight for international bodies, international organizations and governments, you know, Western powers, to urge the Myanmar government to release Aung San Suu Kyi. And we've seen that same phenomenon play out, you know, in the US and in other places, where you have those who are fighting for civil rights, you know, some were not as popular, you know, before they were arrested. The arrest and then being kept in prison always serve as a rallying call, you know. So the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu in 2015 and it being made public generated a lot of reaction. A lot more people who identified with the cause he was fighting for now became more aware of his activities. And then it was reported again and again and again, and more people who identified with the cause he was fighting for was now, more and more people were now supporting his cause. So that decision to arrest Nnamdi Kanu and to keep him in prison by all means made Nnamdi Kanu, in my humble opinion, made him more popular, and now made him like a figure comparable to what Nelson Mandela and other fighters, freedom fighters, and other people who were fighting for their rights, you know, that arrest made him more popular. And the same hard line that the Buhari administration took, they took the same thing with the attempt to arrest Sunday Igboho, who was fighting for Yoruba nation. They also wanted to arrest him too. But Sunday Igboho's case, he escaped. He escaped from Nigeria, fled to Benin Republic. He was arrested in Benin Republic. And the Nigerian government was putting pressure on uh, the Benin Republic to repatriate him back to Nigeria. It took the intervention of leaders of Southwest, like Obasanjo and others, to go to Benin to convince the Beninese government not to repatriate Sunday Igboho. If that wasn't the case, he would have been repatriated back to Nigeria. I would have had that same phenomenon of being arrested and increasing his popularity. And the same thing happened with Eze Zaki, the leader of the Shiite movement in Nigeria, when he was also arrested as well. And so there is this phenomenon where people are arrested, and the call to release them now serve as a rallying point for people who are agitating for the cause the person represents. And so after Nnamdi Kanu was arrested in 2015, he got a lot of popularity, and the call for Biafra, call for Nnamdi Kanu formed IPOB, Indigenous People for Biafra, of Biafra. And, a lot of people who are of Southeastern origin, who identify with this cause, came out protesting for his release. And so the Buhari administration was under a lot of pressure to release him. And after like 2 years, in 2017, he was released. He was released, and he went back to the East. And then there was a series of events that made the Nigerian government to decide to rearrest him. He was released on bail. The court case was still on. So later in that 2017, Nigerian government made an attempt to rearrest him, by sending soldiers, and it was really bloody. A lot of the IPOB, the Indigenous People of Biafra, who were there in support of Nnamdi Kanu, a number of them were killed. Nnamdi Kanu escaped, So 2017, he escaped, and then about 2 years later in 2021, he was then rearrested, and the trial continued. The manner in which he was rearrested was that he was arrested by Kenya authorities, and then he was extradited under very controversial circumstances. He was moved to Nigeria, and then the case has been on since that 2021, and it went up to Supreme Court. This manner of arrest was challenged in court and all that, and now yesterday the Federal High Court now gave a judgment. But so the first point I want to make is the hard line that was taken by the Buhari administration only made things worse. And one reason why it made things worse is that if you look at the southeastern region, the southeast, before Nnamdi Kanu was arrested and after he was arrested, what is the security situation in the southeast? Nnamdi Kanu was arrested supposedly by Nigerian government because they felt he was inciting for the formation of Biafra. that it was inciting people to violence and all of that. But ironically, the security situation in the South is deteriorated after he was arrested. It deteriorated remarkably after he was arrested. So the purpose of his arrest was not served. The purpose was not served because the Southeast region deteriorated into a lot of insecurity. Because we have a situation whereby Nnamdi Kanu formed the IPOB, and then there was a time where a lot of herders, farmers clash, and you had, a number of farmers of Eastern origin being killed in farmlands, across the southeast. And so they now formed the Eastern Security Network. The Eastern Security Network was to be armed groups to protect the farmlands from being invaded by herders, provide security. But it's now turned out that instead of, protecting the homeland, if you put it that way, these armed groups now went into all manner of criminality, you know, such that they were enforcing sit-at-homes, violent enforcement. People were being targeted who did not obey sit-at-home orders, and a lot of things now happened thereafter. So you had a situation whereby the Eastern Security Network that was formed now evolved into something sinister, very, very sinister. So you had that situation. Then you have that of Simon Ekpa, who is a Finnish Nigerian citizen who was in Finland, and with the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu, now, you know, kind of took over some of the activities, of those that were fighting for Biafra. And Simon Ekpa took a more violent tone, you know, and encouraged more violence, you know. So you have a situation whereby, the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu and the events that played out afterwards made the southeast was not safe. So whatever intentions they had in arresting Nnamdi Kanu was not served because of the worsening security situation in the southeast. And so when you have somebody who was more of a radio host, somebody who was more of a, a talker who talks, and there wasn't really much action being taken then, and you pick the person and you held the person in prison for long, and you kept him in spite of pleas for him to be released, then you now created a situation where people were agitating for his release, and the activities of those who were agitating for release now turned into violence, and you now have groups and splinter groups and people who were engaging in all manner of criminality on that on the basis that they were fighting for his release, and on the basis that we were fighting for the cause in which he stood for, you know. So the hardline of the Buhari administration wasn't helpful. And as we've seen with other cases, the Buhari administration kept some people, he held some people under arrest, and even when there were several court judgments for them to be released, immediately they are released, they will be picked up and charged again, you know. So if we're in a constitutional democracy and we go by the rule of law, one would assume that, okay, even if you feel that somebody posed a threat, is it not better for you to have more credible evidence? Is it not better to see how things evolve? Because when you take aggressive action in trying to address something that is still at the infertile stage, and you now set off a series of events that now made the person more famous, more popular, then the purpose of that arrest will not be served, and you end up causing more harm than good. So that's point number one. Now,